so I'm going to do the classic pundit thing and stay at 30,000 feet. I think, first of all, I want to sort of continue with the opening remarks we just heard, because I think they make a very good point. It's something I was alluding to in my remarks earlier today. There is this notion about American exceptionalism out there that it's some sort of batty, weird concept, right? And that people who believe in it aren't empirical and don't care about the numbers and the spending and all these kinds of things, and it's this romantic notion. And it's really not. It goes, see, I agree entirely that the foremost problem with the spending and with the bloated size of government is what it does to the people. One of the points I tried to make in my book, Liberal Fascism, was that the real threat in America is not from a Mussolini or a Hitler-type totalitarian who's going to stomp on our faces and all of the rest. The real danger is from the Huxleyan vision of Brave New World, where we, generations of 10th graders in high school have been presented with that book, and they're always asked the question, what's so bad if everybody's happy? And part of the answer is that, first of all, it's fool's gold. You cannot create that kind of utopia. That's one of the things that conservatives believe in. But second of all, when you have a system that's designed about delivering prepackaged joy to people, you create hollow men. You create men without chests, as C.S. Lewis would put it. And one of the great things about America is that America has a culture, a very specific, nay, unique culture. One of my favorite examples about this comes from the social scientist Seymour Martin Lipset, who studied Canada and America, which is really the most fascinating test case in world history. Conservatives, we always love to talk about West Germany versus East Germany and North Korea versus South Korea as proof of the superiority of Western democratic capitalism and all that kind of stuff. But the really interesting test case was in North America, right? In 1776, if you were perfectly fine with taking orders from the crown and thought things were okay, you were a loyalist or a royalist and you stayed where you were, you moved to Canada, right? If you were, as Tommy Lee Jones says in the movie Firebirds, you had your head and your heart wired together for some full-tilt boogie for freedom and justice, you moved to the 13 colonies and you wanted to duke it out with King George. And so we have the same genetic stock, the same cultural stock in these two places. Fast forward 200 years, you have two very different societies. In Canada 40 years ago, and America 40 years ago, both governments said we're switching to the metric system. The Canadians said, okay, thank you, sir, may I have another? And the Americans say, to hell with that, and so 40 years later, they're all in kilometers and centimeters and all that stuff, and most Americans still think that stuff is witchcraft. Because we don't take orders from government. And I think this sort of gets to my point about it's the cultural role of big government that is the most dangerous. The most dangerous thing about Obamacare isn't that it's going to make people sicker or screw up our healthcare system and all that kind of stuff, though it's going to do those things. But it fundamentally changes the relationship between the individual and the state. It fundamentally changes what it means to be a citizen. And it has been the project of American liberalism going back for a century, since Woodrow Wilson and FDR, to change the American people from being citizens to being subjects, to being clients of the state, people who demand more, right? And you can see the bleeding edge of this with the Occupy Wall Street crowd, right? Everyone points out, there's so much similarity between the Tea Partiers and the Occupy Wall Street guys because they're both against bailouts. Fundamentally misses the distinction, right? Rick Santelli, with his rant around the world, was complaining about the idea of being forced to pay for bailouts. How outrageous it was for you to be forced to pay for your neighbor's mortgage, right? Who put in an extra cent or whatever the phrase was. The guys on Occupy Wall Street, they're against bailouts for Wall Street, but not because they're against bailouts, but because they didn't get one, right? Their complaint isn't that they were forced to pay for bailouts, it's that, man, big daddy government gave those guys stuff and didn't give it to us. There was a piece today in National Review Online about a guy who's furious because he was a public school teacher in New York who went back to get a master's degree in puppetry, and now is shocked to find out that he's still in debt and $35,000 for his student loans. The scandal is that he's only in debt $35,000. So anyway, you can see this, that this is the cultural distinction that we are witnessing that comes from the expectation that the government is there to fix all of your problems. This idea that the government can love you, that it can be your mommy or daddy. And that is the impulse that drives this kind of spending. This is the impulse that drives the size of government. And it is the impulse that the Tea Parties and people like you got involved in politics in many ways for the first time to stop before it's too late. And that's the thing I want to congratulate you for. Thank you all very much.